These rivers are the arteries of the UK. They've got so much wildlife on them that most of us just don't get to see. All life needs water, so if you go near a river, there's going to be life.
Throughout the length of the river, wetlands provide an important buffer, so they are critical, and we've lost 90% of our wetlands in England. So we need to rebuild that, to rebuild resilience.
It's part of what is needed for the full restoration of these habitats. They need the space to create an environment that can breathe with changes in flow.
People are realising if we don't act now, there's going to be no second chance, so we have to do it while we can.
Good evening and welcome to Beaver Trust On The Edge film premiere. I'm Sandra King, I'm the Chief Executive of Beaver Trust. On the Edge is Beaver Trust's second documentary, following on from the international success of our award-winning Beavers Without Borders film in 2020. Now, you're not going to be surprised to hear that at Beaver Trust we are really big beaver fans. What you may not know is we also really love river buffers, and we hope that by the end of this event you will love them as much as we do. River buffers have got a really important role to play in restoring beavers to Britain, but they also provide a simple solution to several complex climate, ecological and water quality problems that we face in Britain, as you will be hearing in the film. And for this On the Edge film, I'm pleased and thrilled, in fact, to say that we've been working again with Nina Constable from Nina Constable Media, and she specialises in conservation storytelling through film. And with this film, On the Edge, Nina takes the audience, you, on a landscape scale journey through England's failing waterways and explores how river buffers can help to restore their future. To help us tell this story, we have Beaver Trust's very own Sophie Pavelle as narrator, and we also enlisted the expertise of key voices in this vital discussion, from farmers through to school children. We're going to be playing the film very shortly, but first of all, a few thank yous. Thank you very much to European Nature Trust and the Hagen Family Foundation for funding the film. Any stunning animations are thanks to Archie Crofton. Thank you so much to all the wonderful contributors for their time and their wisdom and their honesty in this film. Thanks to Eva Bishop, James Wallace and Elliot McCandless for development and production support. And behind the scenes technical wizardry this evening is down to Fabian Harrison. And a final thanks to me to our colleagues and partners over at National Trust, at the Rivers Trust and Woodland Trust, who are working closely with us to champion river buffers through our Riverscapes partnership. So in just a moment, we're going to be screening On the Edge. It's about 20 minutes long. At the end of the film, there'll be a short interval where you can go make a cup of tea, and then join us again for live question and answer with Sophie Pavelle and Nina Constable. And the final thing from me is Sophie and Nina are looking for your questions. So please do post your questions in the comment section on YouTube, and they are going to get through as many as they can this evening. So that's it for me for now. I'll be back right at the end to say goodbye. But let's watch the film and enjoy.
England's rivers are filled with a chemical cocktail of sewage, agricultural waste and plastic.
Well, the Worldwide Fund for Nature has said our rivers are being used as open sewers. Thousands of fish died in Devon earlier this month when an agricultural pollutant got into the river.
Only 14% of the country's rivers have a good ecological status.
Rivers are the lifeblood of our landscapes. Coursing through countryside, towns and cities for thousands of miles, they are a source of life, create critical habitats for myriad species, and are a vital source of fresh water for us.
The River Otter lies right on my doorstep and is such an important place for me to sit and watch the local beavers or run alongside it or even cycle. But have we become disconnected with what lies beneath the surface of our rivers and the reality of the state that they're in?
Our daily lives depend on access to clean fresh water. In the UK, each of us uses an average of 150 litres per day. But as we draw from rivers, we are also polluting them, stripping their ability to function as a life source, a habitat and an ecosystem, resulting in over 80% of rivers in England now in poor health. In the face of the climate and biodiversity crises, it has become abundantly clear that we need to restore the health of our fractured ecosystems and help our rivers recover before we push them over the edge. Over the course of this film, we're going to be exploring the concept of river buffers, a measure that might help us in restoring our rivers. I'm going to be digging deep to understand exactly what a river buffer is, the different shapes they might take, and how they could help. And I'm also going to be exploring above and below the surface and seeing firsthand what lies beneath. So I've come to a spot at the top of Bodmin Moor and I'm here to meet Arlen Rickard, who's Chief Policy Advisor for the Beavers Trust. So he knows his rivers and I can't think of a better person to speak to when I'm on the start of my journey, really, talking about buffers and what they might mean for our rivers in England.
I'm going to show you some wonderful wetland, upland bogs.
Great, I can't wait. It's beautiful.
So this wetland is a really good example of a really excellent functioning wetland. It's still a semi-natural habitat, but it's in recovery and it's doing really well. This is the beginning of the river, and beneath our feet is the classic sphagnum moss, which grows really abundantly in this area. And as the rain falls on this little bit of bog we're looking at now, it captures the rain. You can see it's like a sponge. It's just magic. And it can hold 8 times its weight in water and keeps the river flowing throughout the summer period in the drought. And in the winter, when we have heavy rain, it captures the water and stops us from flooding. Throughout the length of the river, wetlands provide an important buffer between the river and the agricultural practice or urban environments around. Yeah. So they are critical, and we've lost 90% of our wetlands in England. So we need to rebuild that, to rebuild resilience.
How could a buffer zone physically help a wetland to restore and bounce back from being damaged?
Well, buffer zones are really, really important, and they're so much more than just a strip of land beside a river. A good buffer zone will encompass the geomorphology, that's the flow of the water to the river, and it'll recognise where the wetlands should be forming. And in a wetland, you'll capture sediment and runoff and soil. We lose nearly 3 million tonnes a year of soil simply running off land, and that eventually runs to the sea. But further down, where farming is much more intensive, the wetlands are even more critical because they will trap a lot of the sediments, the nutrients coming off the agricultural land, and it's the last chance to trap that and catch it before it reaches the river itself. They really are one of the most important aspects of our countryside and often overlooked. And we can already see the impacts of climate change with increasing frequency of droughts and floods, and correctly designed buffer zones incorporating a range of different types of wetlands will protect our environment and provide resilience as climate change increasingly puts pressure on us.
Despite the complex issues our rivers are facing, Arlen has outlined what seems a pretty simple measure in helping them towards recovery, allowing for a buffer zone along our rivers that could help restore wetlands, minimise runoff, and create a spacious zone along riverbanks where nature can thrive. Next stop on my journey, I'm heading to meet Mike Blackmore on the banks of a chalk stream in Salisbury.
How's it going?
Hi, welcome to the River Wiley.
Here in England, we have over 85% of the world's chalk streams. These man-made systems have become an integral part of our natural environment and a hotspot for fishing. Globally rare, they are a critical habitat for a significant number of species. But like the majority of our rivers, they are in trouble. But here, there is restoration work underway that is helping the river recover.
What you'll see here, just as we come round the corner, is an area of this river where a really wide section of buffer is making a really big difference to the ecology of the river. This sort of sloping transitional habitat from the field up there down to the river has allowed for a succession of different plants to establish. We've got a much higher level of biodiversity here, going from the aquatic environment slowly transitioning up into a terrestrial environment. Before the restoration work was done, there was very little of this sort of habitat available on this section of river. And so moving the fence line back, so excluding the livestock and regrading this bank has essentially allowed for a huge increase in biomass and biodiversity here. And the end result is the people that use this river, the fishing club here, actually have a much healthier river in which to practice their sport.
What worries you about the state of British rivers and their future at the moment?
So, the biggest concern for me on the chalk streams is a big drought. They're not particularly drought resilient. We can make them more drought resilient, but that's a big task.
Is it a realistic prospect for us to expect there to be buffer zones across rivers in England in the near future?
It's part of what is needed for the full restoration of these habitats. They need the space to create an environment that can breathe with changes in flow. We're starting, I hope, to think about rivers not just as a means of getting water off the land and out to sea, that it's something that actually has a value. That can only be good for the rivers.
So I loved that. I've never seen a chalk stream before and I've been wanting to see them for ages. And I think what has really stuck with me is the fact that what was once originally a man-made habitat has now slowly become a really, really important one for tons of species. And I think it shows that if given the space, nature and agriculture and man-made things can actually almost enhance each other.
Many of us have become disconnected from what lies beneath the surface, but not Jack Perks. For the past 10 years, he has been filming underwater in our rivers, fascinated by freshwater and the species and habitats it supports. I'm off to meet Jack at one of his favourite freshwater snorkelling spots. But before we dive beneath the surface, I'm keen to understand what it is about this environment that has kept him close for over a decade and the changes he has seen.
So Jack, your fascination with filmmaking and freshwater habitats has taken you all over the country. What's drawn you to these habitats in the first place?
Well, it's a hidden world, isn't it? Most of us walk along the riverbank and we see the kingfishers and we see the herons, but the fish are often hidden. So that's what kind of drives me to show that hidden world. These rivers are the arteries of the UK. They've got so much wildlife on them that most of us just don't get to see. All life needs water. So if you go near a river, there's going to be life.
Over your years of filming freshwater habitats and diving below the surface, have you seen any changes to them?
It's becoming harder to find rivers that are clear, full of fish and full of life, and I'm really struggling.
And these changes that you describe, where are they coming from and what are they doing to the fish themselves?
I mean, it's a cocktail of problems, really. The water quality is without a doubt the biggest issue for our fish because it's a slow killer. So things like agricultural runoff, road runoff, sewage, they don't necessarily kill the fish, but they'll degrade the spawning habitat. So the adult fish will cling on, but the smaller fish just don't come through. You don't get that recruitment. There is this massive downward trend of our rivers, and if we don't act soon, we're going to lose some iconic species.
Talking of species, you're going to take me under the water. What kind of things might we see today?
Well, we're here on the Tavy, as I say. It's a fantastic salmon river. There's sea trout, maybe an eel if we're lucky, so it's going to be great. I can't wait to get in.
So demure.
You got some, yeah.
Off we go. You've got much bigger things than I have.
It's not the size that counts, it's how you use them.
Diving into the freezing water with Jack, I wasn't sure what to expect. But as soon as we're submerged, we enter a different world. Aquatic plants cling onto the rocks, leaves litter the riverbed, and Jack catches a fleeting glimpse of a brown trout in the torrents. And then, out of the depths of a deep pool, fighting against the rushing river, a salmon emerges. And I begin to realise just how much life is here, below the surface.
That was amazing!
It was great.
Oh my god!
refreshing.
It's just a completely different world, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. That salmon was amazing.
Yeah, it was so much bigger than I thought. Oh, amazing, thank you.
No worries.
Coming face to face with one of the most iconic species that inhabit our rivers and seeing firsthand the role buffers can play in protecting them, it seems that making space for buffer zones along our waterways is a no-brainer. So I'm left feeling, what's the catch? Over 70% of land in the UK is dedicated to agriculture. So understanding what it might take to encourage farmers and landowners to make room along our waterways for buffers is really important.
So I'm actually on my way north at the moment to meet two people who know a lot more about buffers than I do. And I think there's a lot of complexity that I need to unpick about buffers and making space for rivers, but from a landowner's point of view. Claire Robinson of the National Farmers Union works closely with farmers and landowners regarding environmental issues. And I'm keen to hear her thoughts on how setting aside space for buffers on farmland might work and what might need to be put in place to help this happen.
The sunshine is beautiful, isn't it?
So obviously it's really easy for conservationists and NGOs and environmental organisations to come up to farmers and list all the benefits of leaving aside an area of land next to a river. But what are you concerned about for farmers?
So you've got to find a balance that works for both the farming business as well as what nature wants. Farmers need to think about how a buffer strip fits in with the whole business. If you're looking to put land aside so it's more for nature, it's obviously got to be work as part of the farming system.
If the right payment scheme was in place for farmers to set aside this area of land, depending on what that looks like, is this something that the NFU would encourage farmers to apply for?
Well, of course. I think you need to develop the vision working with a few farmers so that you can understand why they might be concerned. If you are looking at something that could be land use change, you need a funding stream that matches that. So one of our members, Richard Bramley, he's got a river bank that is also a flood defence, and then next to that on the field side he's also put some land aside, is actually then planted or is managing in a regenerative fashion the land next to that bank.
Excited to hear that Richard Bramley has buffers in action on his land, my next stop is to visit his farm in York and understand the impact of this on his business and farming.
So we're standing next to a buffer sort of zone here. What impact has this had on your farm?
When it comes to setting land aside, in this instance, I don't feel it has a huge negative impact. When I see the bird surveys and I see that, we've still got good populations of corn buntings. Where I'm stood here, I'm watching little flocks of finches just popping in and out, and that's really rewarding. I'm working equally as hard to make sure that the farm is producing stuff, but once you've got it in your mind that you can also complement that with improving the biodiversity on the farm as well, then you kind of get hooked. Personally, my viewpoint is that's the only way forward, and that is to both be able to recognise that farming is something that we need, it has to produce our food, but we also can't discount the fact that farming has had an impact. And what we can do is we can improve biodiversity on farm, creating habitat for insects. In the process, we're improving productivity, we're improving the resilience of our soils. So there's multiple benefits.
So if we're asking farmers to set aside more areas of their land, is this something that the government should be supporting?
Well, the answer is it needs long-term commitment to funding. Government can have a role in facilitating. The key thing for me is going to be around reward and simplicity. And if what we really value is more wetland, then that does have to be reflected somehow back on farm for the long term. There's a lot of good going on out there, and we need to culture on that good.
Back home in Devon, I have one final meeting with a group of young students, and I'm really curious to hear how the next generation perceive the concept of buffers and whether they seem important to them.
So guys, how about we talk a bit about why we love rivers so much? What is it about them that you really like?
Especially during lockdown, I really liked going here like every day, and there was usually herons and birds
a lot of rivers in England are actually in a lot of trouble. So at Beaver Trust, we're really excited about a concept called river buffers, where basically we're allowing just a little bit of space between the river and an area of active land to maybe act as a bit of a sponge and help the river recover. Do you think this might be a good idea for our rivers?
Some of the things that are used to make sure plants grow or don't have insects on can be poisonous to animals, and we definitely don't want that in the river. So a river buffer would reduce the chance of that.
A river buffer would also help stop floods again, which can also help with farmland and villages.
What are you guys excited about this year for nature?
People are noticing more than they did last year, and I think more people will be trying to work out how to help rivers.
As they get more healthier, there'll be more beavers and so much more wildlife. Also, I think people are realising if we don't act now, there's going to be no second chance, so we have to do it while we can.
Up until now, we have looked to take as much as we can from our landscape, whether it's for our survival, farming, building, often working right up to the very edge. But we are now facing one of the biggest challenges we have ever experienced, as climate change offers an unpredictable future. Ensuring our life support systems are in the best health possible is crucial in giving us a fighting chance. We know that British rivers are in trouble, and we've known for some time. But this journey has shown hopeful demonstrations of a real solution: river buffer zones. I've seen how varied buffers are and how they can actively restore rivers, be it wetlands trapping pollutants, fencing back the edge of chalk streams, or farmers benefiting from nature returning to their land. Buffers offer us all a beacon of hope for healthier river systems. As freshwater habitats waver on the edge of survival, it is now up to us to make room for rivers, to call upon our government to support buffers and return the space our rivers need to recover and to thrive.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for watching On the Edge with us. It's such a special evening and we're so delighted to have you here with us. Welcome to the Q&A with me and Nina. We're really excited to be here. Just a little thing before we get into it. So you may have seen, if you stayed and watched the slideshow during the interval, a couple of graphics, one of which was the Big Give Green Match Fund. So if you enjoyed On the Edge and you like the look of Beaver Trust and you'd like to support our work, until Friday, there's an opportunity to double every donation you give. So any donation you can give today between now and Friday will be match funded by the Big Give, and all of that will go towards helping us restore beavers and regenerate landscapes. So if you're interested in that, there's lots of information on our website and our social media. And the other graphic was for another brilliant documentary by our friends at Scotland The Big Picture called Riverwoods, which spotlights the fragility of Scottish salmon populations in the wild. And it's a real kind of manifesto as to what our rivers should be like. So if you enjoyed On the Edge, we really encourage you to go and watch Riverwoods when you can. They're having an epic screening in London very soon, and are also showing it all around the country. So please do go and see that. So question and answers, lots to talk about. Thank you so much for brilliant questions. We'll try and get through as many as we can up until 8 o'clock. But I'm just going to start with a general one that we've had a few times to Nina, our brilliant director and producer of On the Edge. This film was very different to Beavers Without Borders in the sense that we didn't have a cute fairy brown mammal helping hook in the hearts of the nation into complex stories. So did you encounter any challenges with telling the story of river buffers? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think with this, like you said, it kind of didn't have a cute fluffy beaver at the centre of it. And actually the concept, it felt like something quite technical to try and communicate. But I think as soon as we started speaking to the contributors, and I think the first interview we did with Arlen, we were like, actually, this isn't going to be that difficult to communicate, because they were all so knowledgeable. And I think the quality of the interviews, and so actually it was one of those things where one of the challenges was whittling down the incredible interviews, because they were probably over an hour long each, and then picking the bits that kind of weave the story together. But also I think one of the things that was really important to us with this story was keeping it balanced and making sure that we had different voices, that we heard from conservationists, but we also heard from farmers, we heard from the people that this would directly impact, but then also from the future generation as well, hearing from the school children. I think that was a really important thing, to hear from them as to what their awareness was, how much they understood. And I think we were, all of us, really, impressed, but also kind of taken aback just by quite how aware they were, but also that it helped us to understand that the concept itself is quite simple. It's just the implementation of it that is complicated. And so, yeah, I think it was the quality of the interviews, the people that we spoke to, that really helped to kind of ease the challenges that I thought I was facing at the beginning.
Well, you did a fantastic job at doing that. And yeah, there was just so much material that we had to sift through and pick out, but ultimately we hope that we've kind of introduced this very nuanced but very hopeful concept of giving rivers more space, and we hope that this could be a tool to sort of bring that conversation to more people.
Definitely. And I also, one of the things also is the way that you present as well. I think you naturally bring a lightness and a hope as well, and I think that was part of having your voice at the centre of it. Of something that was quite serious and quite technical. I think that also gave it the tone that we needed to really engage people and raise awareness. So yeah, you're a huge part of
it. Thanks. So talking of technical, we have a lot of kind of buffer and policy and practical questions that want to find out, how can we implement buffers and what's that going to look like and what are the hurdles that are in our way. One of the questions here is from Jacob Dykes at the European Nature Trust, which is one of our partners. Thank you very much. Who says, are we finding that landowners and farmers are becoming more aware of the need for buffers? I don't know whether, Nina, we could chat about that in the context of going to see Richard and Claire from the NFU side, and then talking more broadly.
Yeah, well, I think Claire was amazing as well. And one of the things that she said was about how, like, one of her main roles is working with farmers and the environment, kind of trying to make them, you know, more aware of their practices and the impact. And then Richard as well, I think we were both, like, his enthusiasm and how excited he got about seeing the birds on his land. But there were so many, we couldn't show everything that he was doing on his land, and he wants to do more as well, but there were so many little different pockets where he had the flood defence and the buffer zones, and some of it was through government funding schemes, but then whether that money had run out or whether he was just interested in doing things, he was also funding a lot of things himself through his own awareness and learning, and I think that was really amazing to see. And I think, you know, there was so much more of that conversation that you had with him, and lots of pertinent questions that you asked. And I'm not sure if there's anything that you can remember from the interview that we couldn't include, but
well, I think just this, you know, there's this real widespread desire, I think, among the farmers and landowners that we were lucky enough to film with. And of course, Arlen Rickard, who opened the film, is a farmer in Bodmin himself. So that's another one of his many hats. And just speaking to these people who've worked the land for many years and often in a multi-generational way, there's such a desire to work with nature, but then they encounter hurdles and stagnation in progress with that mission when it comes to policy and just being financially supported. So I think once we started to explain and really dive deep into the concept of river buffers and what they represented, especially after speaking to Mike and looking at the biodiversity benefits and how it can totally transform a landscape for the better, you know, they're on board with that, but then they need to see that recognised. They need to see the effort of setting land aside and giving that space recognised financially and just part of their, I guess, support package from government as landowners, but then at no cost to their production. So we had really interesting behind the scenes chats with Richard about, you know, the future of the productivity on his farm and what this would mean and how to achieve that balance. And that answers sort of another question here about, I've lost it, but I think it's more about the fact that landowners are keen for buffers, but they need to be really supported by the government financially. So we hope that this film is really the start of that national conversation to then start to help build a policy with government and work with governmental organisations to try and actually make this more present across our countryside and perhaps even more normalised. There's a question here that I really like from Belinda on the Cumbrian edge of the Yorkshire Dales. That sounds very nice. Who's asked, what can non-landowners do to help? And I think this relates to many of the questions we're getting in terms of, okay, lots of people don't own land, but they want to support buffers and the conversation of river restoration. Perhaps in light of this film, you know, how can people sort of go forward and be an ambassador for buffers, as it were?
Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah, kind of. I guess, like, in terms of, you know, this film is going to hopefully be a tool for communications and hopefully inspire people from all kinds of demographics and communities. What are we asking them? What do we want people to do?
Well, I think even just like you said, the conversation being started, but I think it's also one of the things that people often go away from a film that has a conservation message, kind of thinking, what can they do? And I think volunteering with local organisations can really help you to kind of then just have your finger on the pulse of what kind of things are happening or what actions you can take, or just to be, just to keep updated with kind of things that you can get more involved in. But also I think one of the things that speaking to Jack about especially was this disconnection that people have with fresh water. I think, you know, it was somewhere that people used to swim a lot, but then I think with water quality going down, people have kind of kept a distance, but also you don't necessarily think about going snorkeling in a river. And I think just spending time getting reconnected with your local rivers and waterways and understanding what state they're in, because, you know, I think it's 80% of the rivers in the UK are in a poor state of health, but there are some healthy rivers. So going to see somewhere that shows you what it could be like. I think kind of personally reconnecting and becoming aware can then help you just become more passionate and, want to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lovely question here from a teacher who says, such a brilliant film, thank you very much. I'm a teacher and outdoor education lead at my school. Do you have any tips or resources for getting children engaged in river conservation? I'll answer that to start with, I guess. So education and that strand of communications at Beaver Trust is a really important and growing priority for us, because obviously we're introducing, especially with beavers and then with river buffers, kind of big new things into the sort of national agenda of ecology and natural history and nature conservation. And so there's a lot to learn, and helping to bust myths that have developed over the last few centuries about beavers, for example, and then also learning to talk about rivers in a way that includes beavers, other parts of the food web, trees, farming, communities, flood, climate, all of these strands together is a huge opportunity to really start to almost re-educate the public in this new world and this new way of living alongside nature. And so we've got lots of resources already on our website. We've got some FAQs, we've got some kind of fun educational packs that you can download. We've also got our podcast, the Lodgecast, which is a very sort of easy to digest, quite fun, educational form of communication, which is available on all platforms. And we speak to all sorts of guests. We speak to Nina, we speak to Arlen about climate resilience, nature restoration. We speak to people like Isabella Tree, Simon Reeve, Dr. Amir Khan about eco-anxiety and green prescribing. And so that's a great way to get, with having a lot of young people get engaged with us through our podcast there. And we've also got lots of plans for educational YouTube shorts and YouTube series on our channel here too. So lots to do. I think the main thing as well is just to try and, if you can, if you're an educational lead, if there's a way for you to incorporate teaching about giving space to rivers and how that benefits the whole food web and ecology and farming and climate, if there's a way to incorporate that into your teaching, that it would be amazing. We'd love to, open up a dialogue there in terms of perhaps helping you to do that and seeing what we can do. There's a more practical question. Sorry, there are so many great questions. So thank you so much for sort of dotting all about.
I was going to say there's a good one here for you as Beaver Trust, which is, would having both beavers and a buffer zone complement river health and biodiversity?
Oh, that's a corker. Short answer, yes, absolutely it would. So buffers, at Beaver Trust, we're really excited about river buffers because the space that they provide offers so many sort of little beacons of hope in terms of reducing the conflict that beavers might be having with nearby landowners and communities. Just by having a bit more space between the river and the farmland, beavers can be a bit sort of freer to do what they want without impacting the land next door. Buffers offer more foraging areas and foraging opportunities for beavers, so there'd be less chance of, say, your favourite oak tree or beech tree being felled by a hungry beaver, because, as Mike was showing us in the chalk stream, a more scrubby, complex, biodiverse, biomass-heavy buffer can have willow, aspen, cherry, apple, far more choices for a beaver which is foraging on a riverbank, and minimising conflict again and helping us live alongside beavers more harmoniously and successfully. In a buffer, the solid tree root system from that complexity of foliage and plants will stabilise the riverbank. So when a beaver is burrowing in and creating its territory, it will remain intact and then just still contribute to a more complex, established riparian zone. And as beaver populations expand, if rivers have more space, they'll just be able to absorb those beavers, I guess, a bit more seamlessly. And so hopefully, in an ideal world, there'll be a complex, busy landscape, but there'll just be enough room for everything. And so, we're really excited about the prospect of what buffers can provide. But then, of course, as with anything, as with beaver restoration, it's a case of managing those impacts, managing that restoration, and working with people and collaborating, not just on projects like this, but in policy and in partnerships like Riverscapes as well. So it's an exciting time, it's a challenging time, but as Sandra said in her introduction, we're really all about rivers and river health. We've got to look at landscape scale restoration if there's a chance of having climate resilience and adaptation. So yeah, very excited about beavers and buffers together. Nina, there's a practical question about the film itself. How long did it take to film? What was kind of the timeline of getting On the Edge together?
Gosh, when did we start first talking about it? This is where I can't remember now. I think we started with it. Yeah, I think it was early summer when we had the first conversations, and then I worked on the script over the summer. And then I think we started filming early autumn and then finished filming end of January, I think. And then the edit was about 5 weeks. But the filming, as always with working outside, is always driven by the weather. And then also when you're working with incredibly busy people as well. I think Richard was, in Zoom meetings 5 minutes before we were there and had to fly straight off when we were finished, and so it's also fitting around people's schedules. But yeah, I think it was probably 3 or 4 months of filming, kind of where we could fit in with people. But yeah, I think with this kind of thing as well, it's the research and the scripting that actually takes a lot of time, because you just want to make sure that you're properly informed before you kind of go in and start speaking to people, but also to make sure that you're being representative and so speaking to the right people as well. But we had some beautiful weather, and I think the day that we had with Jack on the river, it was this autumn day where just kind of leaves falling off the trees and light kind of shining through, and it was just, there was some really, really lovely days. But also working with school children as well, and kind of working around their schedule meant that was kind of took a little bit longer. And so I think, we probably were about a month longer than we had intended, but it was important to take that time and to make sure that we kind of waited, and so that we could include all of the voices that we felt were really important to involve. No, there was a lot of reworking of the narrative, just because I certainly found this a far more challenging story to try and piece together in terms of what are we trying to say and what are we asking people to do, because one of the most important things of conservation storytelling is what's the call to action, and what do we want people to go away with. And so trying to nail that as a team, and all the team behind the scenes as well, it was a good head scratcher for sure. There's one question that I just want to make sure that we do answer before we run out of time. So Vinnie Flynn has asked, ideally, what size buffer would a farmer be expected to leave? And that's such a good question, because what we're proposing is the idea of a buffer, not a buffer that is like a one size fits all. Like, we're not asking all farmers to set aside 10 metre wide strip all the way down your field, because no farm is the same, no river is the same, no land system, river system is the same. So I think, and the wonderful animations by Archie Crofton in the film as well demonstrate how varied buffers are and how no two buffers are the same. And it's more actually what we're trying to introduce is the idea of giving rivers more space, and what that looks like can vary totally depending on whether the river is kind of in an area of wilderness, a bit like Bodmin Moor, or going through a village or a busy town or near a railway or whatever it is. Hopefully, if buffers are recognised in policy and in a funding stream for farmers, there will be enough support to be able to tailor some sort of buffer zone on a farm to suit the farmer and the river and the wildlife. And so there will be a variety of buffers, hopefully, on offer, like a catalogue, if you will, of different buffers. It was also, I think this was one of the things that when you have a limited amount of time to tell a story. I think if we could have included the entire time that we filmed with Arlen, it would really demonstrate that, because we actually ended up going to the 3 different areas, kind of gradually going kind of down river. And even the first place we went to, exactly, in that first area on Bodmin Moor was restored, and it was healthy. And then we went down and we saw an area that was quite different, but then there was still this buffer zone. And then we even went down to the agricultural zone where the wetlands were trying to recover, and there were these kind of marshy areas where there were these plants kind of coming back up, but not right next to the river, kind of a little bit further kind of back at the bottom of the kind of bank. But it was just spending the time with him and just seeing these 3 different areas and these 3 different buffer zones on this kind of one river system was amazing. And I think if anyone has the opportunity to do that and kind of, walk down a kind of catchment and see the different shapes that it can take, and each one of them were kind of performing a role that was helping the river, that was amazing to see. So I think, might need to make a film just about Arlen.
And I remember what really struck both of us is the fact that often the wetland, and right before the riverbank, if it's got that space, it doesn't have to be massive, but that really is the last chance to capture the sediment, the pollution, all the runoff before it enters the watercourse. And so it's this natural sponge that we've eroded and removed and dredged over the last century. But it can be restored, and that's the beauty of it. They're not gone forever. If we give rivers the space to do that, those wetland systems and that sort of way of a river working and moving with swings in climate, swings in temperature and weather, that can bounce back. And that's what's so exciting. It's just the fact that we need to kind of garner support and awareness of that and the benefits that will bring to a point where it's adopted on a wider scale. There's a question here that's really lovely from Sai Bidi. Are there any plans for wider consultations with farmers and perhaps via the NFU on the subject of river buffers? Would this include a cost effectiveness study? So this is something that we are working with our partners, Rivers Trust, Woodlands Trust, National Trusts, in a thing called the Riverscapes Partnership, which is going to be working together and starting a sort of national conversation and consultation about how to implement river buffers on a wider scale and what that would look like, and liaising with the government and actually trying to progress this. So this will involve wider consultations with farmers, landowners, anglers, and all the above. So watch this space. Hopefully that will happen. We have probably about 30 seconds left until I'm going to hand back over to Sandra. But Nina, was there a highlight for you in this film, in the making of On the Edge?
I think your excitement at seeing the salmon, and I think when you kind of got out of the water, and when you said as well that you had actually never seen one kind of in person in its natural habitat, and I think that was just amazing. And I think Jack he so wanted you to see something, but the water was quite brown, so I think it was quite peaty, and I think kind of didn't think we'd see anything. And when you both emerged, you were really excited, he was really excited for you for that experience, and it was just and it was quite near the end of filming as well. And I think that was just a really, really lovely experience to kind of see, both of your joy.
Oh, well, that's the same for me, actually. How serendipitous. Well, gosh, everyone, thank you so much for such brilliant questions. I'm sorry that we only really scratched the surface, but please let's keep this conversation going. It's brilliant that you've all engaged with it, and we're just really excited to finally show you a project that's been months in the making. So that's it from me, Nina. Thank you so much for watching the film. And before we close, I'm going to hand back over to Sandra for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much to Sophie and Nina. That was a brilliant Q&A session. I think we got through about 10% of the questions, which is good and bad in equal measure. I can see all the questions and comments that have been coming in, and I can definitely see that we have infused you, the audience, on the role and importance of river buffers in terms of delivering some really big climate and ecological impact for really fairly minimal land use change. And of course, river buffers do have a really important role to play if we are wanting to, well, we are definitely wanting to bring beavers back to Britain. So a few have asked what you can do. We urge you to share this film and continue the discussion on making space for river buffers. If you've got any questions on the film, and I know we didn't get through them all, please do email us. You can get in touch at info@beavertrust.org, and we will do our best to get back to you. Any organisations who are interested in helping to spread the word on river buffers, do get in touch. The more of us pulling in the same direction and making the same asks of government on this, the more chance we have to succeed. So we'd love to hear from you. Generally, just those of you who are thinking about how you can support Beaver Trust's work, do follow us if you're on social media and share and like, and it helps to get the message out. Sign up for our free newsletter so you can get the latest updates on our work with beavers and landscape regeneration. And as Sophie mentioned just before the Q&A, if you possibly can, make a donation before Friday lunchtime and help us to get over the edge, not on the edge in terms of our big give, then that would be fantastic. And a final plug from me for the Riverwoods film. It is fantastic. It's more voices in a similar sort of vein, so do try and get to see it. If any of you are in the London area and going to the premiere at all, then I'll be there, so please come and say hello in person. So just as I wrap up, thank you again to Nina, our partners, the On the Edge team, Fabian for making it all possible, and all of the Beaver Trust team for your hard work behind the scenes on this. This event and the documentary will be available on YouTube as of this evening on Beaver Trust's YouTube channel, so that's where you can get hold of it. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this special screening of On the Edge, and enjoy the rest of your evening.